Hi, Dr. Patrick Gentempo here, and thank you for joining us on our YouTube channel. We have great content in store for you. I'm so excited to be here with you, and let's jump right into it.
Thank you for being here. I am so excited to learn from you in all different ways. Can you tell me your name and a little bit of your background?
Yeah, and thank you for having me, by the way. My name is Toni Bark, and I'm a physician. But that doesn't really explain my background because my background is quite eclectic, and I've always been very health conscious and interested in health, not just medicine. But my academic background is I went to medical school, I did residency, I have a master's in medical science, disaster planning. But what you don't know is that I was raised in a family that was very health conscious, and I've been working out in health conscious and focused on my food since I was a child. And my food has evolved, as has my workout schedule and the things that I do, kind of the biohacking tricks that I do to improve mitochondrial function, autonomic function, which I believe is like the basis of, health and longevity.
So tell me a little bit more about that, because so many people have heard about the mitochondria, and we know, okay, yes, it's part of our cells, it's an organelle, they're organelles in our cells, but what does it mean to you?
So mitochondria, for people who don't know, it's separate DNA from our own DNA, which is fascinating all in of itself. It's directly from our mothers, so it's linked down your maternal line, and it's cloned, basically. And it was theoretically bacterium that we incorporated. So that's fascinating, but that's not why I'm doing this. The mitochondria is the fuel cell. It's the cell, it's part of the cell that is the engine. So I have a electric car, all electric, but some people have hybrids. And mitochondria, actually all mitochondria, can run or create energy, or ATP, which is the energy for the cell to respire and to be alive and to be able to do its function. And mitochondria can use glucose, or they can use fats. And in some cells, it's going to be in the form of free fatty acids, and in some cells, it's going to be in the form of ketones. And that is the difference. Whichever fuel you're using is going to make a big impact on how well the mitochondria are going to last and how well they're going to function, because glucose comes with 4 oxygen species attached to it. And oxygen, while we need it, also creates reactive oxygen species, which is, it oxidizes things in the mitochondria. Whereas fat will produce, in terms of producing the same amount, one molecule of fat will give you almost twice as much ATP as the glucose molecule with half the reactive oxygen species, because there's 2 oxygen molecules on a fat molecule. There's 2 oxygens attached to a fat molecule, not 4. So it's a much more efficient fuel in terms of, less steps going into the mitochondria to be used than glucose, and then you get more fuel and less byproduct, so less waste. And the waste is harmful to the mitochondria, right? But it's just part of living. Like, there's always going to be some damage. We need the oxygen, but there's some price to pay for having that oxygen.
So how many people in this country, like as a percentage, what do you think, how many people are using this information and providing the mitochondria with fat, with this preferred fuel?
So, of course, in my world, it's like a lot of people, but I know that's not the real world. I would say all the endurance athletes, like most of the endurance athletes, most of the top athletes that are into being at peak performance work, and I'm talking about really elite athletes, most of them are onto the keto thing because they know that they're going to perform better. They're never going to hit a wall. You can only store 2,000 calories of glycogen. I don't care who you are. That's all you're storing. So if you're 150 pounds and you're running a marathon, by mile 15 or 18, you've hit a wall. And so if you're an elite athlete, you're going to want to be in your peak performance. And so most of those guys are doing keto at this point. Then you've got like the biohackers around, people who just want to be healthy and they like the idea of like not going to the doctor and kind of bucking the mainstream, which, the mainstream tells you to have 6 to 8 servings of whole grains.
Right.
Oh my God, we'd all be diabetic if everybody listened to that. And most people are diabetic who listen to it. And then you've got a small group of doctors and nutritionists who are willing to look into this and say out loud, this is really where we need to go. What we've been thinking about fat is all wrong. And, how a calorie is not a calorie. You hear a lot of endocrinologists say a calorie is a calorie. It's not true. So it's a small group, I would say, of physicians. It's a small group of scientists. It's a growing group of people. I mean, here we are in California, Southern California, and I can tell you that I was here just 2 weeks ago hiking, camping, and I was able to pick up organic, vegan, keto food already prepared at Pacific Coast Greens, which I don't have anything to do with them. I just plugged them, but I was like happy to find that. And, you know, in the Midwest, you're not going to find organic, plant-based, keto, high-fat, low-carb, you're not going to find that prepared. But in New York, you can. In California, and Southern California, you can. In Santa Fe, you can. Like, there's growing communities that are very health aware and don't follow the mainstream. They're smarter than that, because the mainstream lags behind for so many years because, one, it's dogma that people don't change that easily. Two, there's political, financial reasons. I mean, in Australia today, if you're a doctor and you recommend a high-fat keto diet to reverse patients' diseases, you can get your license suspended. It has happened already a few times.
Wow, I had no idea that was happening in Australia.
Absolutely. Australia has their own brand of food and pharma shills. I don't know why. Like, those of us who follow this don't really understand why it's so strong in Australia. But I have been attacked on social media by mainstream physicians and who I believe are probably have an agenda, saying, they try to scare people out of keto. Like, it's, you wear the fat you eat, and it's, kidney damage, and you get a fatty liver. All those are wrong. Absolutely, completely wrong. 180-degree wrong, right? So once you're using fat as fuel, it's a whole different thing. That's a whole different thing. And you don't wear the fat you eat, because fat, the fat you wear is triglycerides. And triglycerides, while they can be made from almost any macronutrient, they're mostly made by glucose, excessive glucose, right? They can be made by excessive proteins. And if you're really eating way too much fat, more than calories than you could ever use, you're going to start converting that to glucose and then to triglycerides too. But there is an agenda, because if everyone did this, like if everyone was keto a few months out of the year, like forget about being keto their whole life or all the time, but if they were keto a few months out of the year, or a few weeks out of every month, we would have disease rates plummeting. The healthcare system would start collapsing, because this healthcare system relies on people getting sicker and sicker, and it is the fastest growing industry in the world, the American healthcare industry. And so there is so much money riding on this. In 3 weeks of ketosis, my patients who were doing it for other reasons, their high blood pressure is gone. I reverse insulin-resistant diabetes. Patients that are on insulin, we get them off insulin and non-diabetic within a month. Within a month.
Wow.
They've been using insulin for years. This isn't the autoimmune type, right? This is the more common type that we're seeing now. Dementia, foggy brain, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, all these autoimmune diseases, chronic microglial activation from vaccine injury, and kids on the spectrum, and ADD. So it's not just cancer. And of course, seizures. I mean, this is where, when I trained as a pediatrician, I did pediatrics and rehab, and in pediatrics, back in the 80s, I mean, this diet had been used for decades already. For
decades and decades,
decades and decades, since the early 1900s for seizure control. So it's a threat to the healthcare system. It's an industry disruptor. If everyone was doing this and knew this would be a major industry disruptor to pharma and to big food for some reasons, because of some of the foods that people eat. It's keeping them from being able to go into ketosis because of the way it affects our bowel flora, like Roundup, certain pesticides, right? So it would be an industry disruptor if everybody had this knowledge. They wouldn't need to go to their doctor. They wouldn't need prescription meds. They'd be reversing their cancer without all the chemo and all the radiation and all the surgeries, because they understand it's the mitochondria that's damaged and they need to focus on their mitochondria. So it's such a big industry disruptor that information is not out there, and there's counter information for a reason, I believe. And I think the evidence of that is having physicians in Australia having their license suspended for recommending high-fat diets. Now, if they recommend high-carb diets, they're not getting their license suspended. You know that.
Why do you think that fat has been the enemy for so many years?
Well, for one reason, and I don't know if I can say the company, but we know that Coca-Cola, we also know, I think, other people in the sugar industry, like the conglomerate, were paying people, academics and a scientist at the CDC, to keep the story going, that fat is the problem and not sugar. I remember in the 70s and 80s hearing Indian doctors, because I started studying homeopathy about 20-something years ago, and I would hear these Indian doctors saying, sugar is what causes heart disease, it's not fat. And I remember thinking, wow. And remember the Woody Allen, I don't know, you're too young, but Woody Allen had a great movie called Sleeper. So for everybody out there who's listening, if they know this movie, there was a scene where it was supposed to be ironic. He goes into this time machine and he comes out in the future. And they say, we now know that high fat and things like, heavy cream and hot fudge, well, they said hot fudge, which would be too sweet unless it was keto hot fudge, but is now healthy for you, and we recommend high fat diets, and that was supposed to be really funny, like things were all turned on its head. But the truth is that there was a political intent on keeping the public and the professionals misinformed. There was somebody at the CDC taking money. There were academics being paid to write these articles. So people were all being told by the CDC. And I can't tell you in how many other documentaries I've had to talk about the CDC misinforming the public, but this is a problem that we have now.
So why are there millions of people, despite all of the negativity around fat, why are there millions and millions of people all over the internet asking each other questions in closed Facebook communities, trying to understand this idea that fat may not actually be the culprit?
So a lot of people don't like to think that the system is rigged, especially if they're part of the system. If you, that's one thing. So if you make good money and you're working for a big company that's invested in these other companies, and it's like you don't want to think that you're part of this system. So there's some cognitive dissonance. That's one thing. Two, we've been ingrained. So the public has been ingrained to think, oh, I can't eat that, it's fat. Like I only eat lean meat, or whatever. It's like whenever you fill out a questionnaire on health, how many servings of whole grains a day do you eat? And I always write 0. And then they assume that means I'm eating white flour, right? It never occurs to anybody that it's because I'm not eating grains, right? So we've been ingrained, that's funny, ironic that word came up, that to think that fat is bad and clogs the arteries, and that, as long as you count your calories, you can have sugar. That's been the mentality, and it's a dogma, and it's hard for people to break it. But the other thing is that, remember, if you're a glucose burner, you're addicted. I mean, you're an addict. People don't realize this. They think I'm crazy when I say that, but you're an addict, because when that blood glucose drops and you're not fat adapted, you don't feel well. Like, it's that, oh my God, I gotta eat soon, I can't wait. Like, I gotta eat because I'm gonna get irritable. You hear this all the time. I remember feeling like that. All the time. It was either from coffee or carbohydrates that made me feel that way. And it would be like, I couldn't wait to eat. It's like I couldn't wait another 2 hours if I felt like that. I would feel irritable and, couldn't think straight. And that is a common story that I hear, because people aren't fat adapted. And we're meant to be fat adapted.
Are we?
Yes. I mean, so think about it. If it takes 2 less steps to get free fatty acids or ketones into the cell, to the mitochondria, and it produces less byproduct, and you get more energy from it, doesn't that tell you that that's really the primary fuel?
Thanks so much for being here and watching that video. And can I ask you to please subscribe to our channel so you can find out when we're posting new content. You'll be alerted right away when we do. To share this with people you think might benefit from the information, and certainly it helps us if you like the video. So if you like what you just saw, go ahead and hit that like button. And again, thank you so much for being here with me right now.